A little over 150 years ago, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation freed all the slaves within the Confederate States. Now, true abolition of slavery wouldn't be accomplished until a few years later, with the passing of the 13th Amendment in 1865. As we celebrate the subsequent centennial of the Civil War and the proclamation, people believe that the issue of slavery is done and over with. That's no longer an issue. However, more people are enslaved than ever before. FreeTheSlaves.net has some estimates as high as 27 million people currently enslaved worldwide, compared to the transatlantic slave of 12 million. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal activity in the world, according to the Polaris Project. FreedomCenter.org has human trafficking has grown into a $32 billion business, with the sex trafficking accounting for 28 of that billion. That's roughly 81% of all human trafficking is sexual trafficking. Victor Hugo once wrote, and I quote, "Slavery still exists, but now only applies to women and is same as prostitution," from his very famous novel Les Miserables. With these daunting numbers, it may seem like little is done to stop this lucrative industry. However, mass communications such as campaigns, social media, and film are used to combat and raise awareness against the global sex trafficking industry. Multiple nonprofit organizations have launched campaigns to counteract this inhumane business. The first one is the International Justice Mission. According to IJM's website, the Freedom Commons is a grassroots campaign compelling people to contact their state and federal representatives to help pass anti-slavery legislation in the United States. They also call for the support of Congress to pass the Human Trafficking Prioritization Act. The act elevates the State Department's Trafficking in Persons Office to a federal bureau from an actual federal agency, placing human trafficking as one of the most important diplomatic concerns for the United States. Another example would be the World Help International. WHI offers emergency aftercare, helping survivors of sexual slavery a path towards recovery. They provide immediate and comprehensive care, life skills training, and reintegration to normal society. Prevention and education programs are offered in some of the most vulnerable countries in the world, with a big focus being in Cambodia and Sierra Leone. World Help International trains local leaders to identify the signs of trafficking and where to report it. Now, since most of our generation receive our current events through social media, nonprofit organizations have utilized these modern methods of communication to further raise awareness. Social media engages a younger generation in an open and honest dialogue. Multiple organizations like NotForSale.org and Christina Caines, who actually spoke here at Liberty a couple days ago, the 821 campaign, constantly launch grassroots campaigns to stop the global slave trade. Here's the recent posting, just like an image from the 821 campaign. Quote, "There's enough slaves in the world to fill the MetLife Stadium, which is where they held Super Bowl in New Jersey this year, 352 times. That's an incredible, amount of people." Now, the brutal reality of the sex trafficking industry is explored through the visual form of documentaries and film, because we are more visual people, and it really drives home when we see something in visual form. In the fall of 2012, a friend of mine from the hall was promoting a documentary screening at Towns Auditorium. The documentary opened my eyes to the horrors of prostitution and the sheer size of the sex trafficking industry. That documentary was Nefarious Merchant of Souls. In 2007, Benjamin Nolet went across 19 different countries and 4 continents on this fact-finding mission. The movie, released in 2011, is the first part of a planned trilogy. Nefarious explores in depth the cause and effect of the global sex trafficking industry. From the infamous, Red Light District in Amsterdam, to the Nevadian brothels of Las Vegas, the breaking grounds of Eastern Europe, to the pedophilic capital of the world, Soi Pak, Cambodia. Nolan and his crew documents hundreds of hours in the many ways women and children find themselves exploited into this unforgiving lifestyle. Some are tricked, some are kidnapped, or some are willingly sold by their parents, as is the case in Cambodia. The film focuses on three key areas of the sex trafficking industry, like I mentioned before: Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Western United States. Now, when I mentioned the breaking grounds of Eastern Europe, I was specifically referring to the former Soviet state of Moldova. Since its independence in 1991, it is estimated that nearly 10% of the population has been trafficked. 10%. That's just an incredible number. For example, one 16-year-old Moldovan girl applied for a house cleaner position. Unfortunately, she was raped and trafficked into Italy, and 26 months later, after being in captivity and being forced to sell sex, she escaped into a women's shelter. Now, the Italian government only offered a residency if she would testify against her tracker. This is coming from LexisNexis. Now, Stella's voice gives an interesting kind of quote about how crucial, how much an epicenter Moldova and Ukraine and the surrounding countries are. And I quote, Moldova is the engine of the sex trafficking machine across Europe. Countless girls are kidnapped or tricked into leaving the country. Hours later, they are shipped to Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, and other nations where they are beaten, drugged, and forced into prostitution. The situation is even more dire in the country of Cambodia. Apathetic parents sell their children due to a debt they owe from a loan shark or just out of personal gain. The problem is that it creates almost a sense of normalcy selling your children to the child trafficking industry. Now, finally, the film focuses on legalized prostitution in Nevada, saying that even with a regulated system, oftentimes women are abused and mistreated, sometimes even worse than their legal counterpart. Excuse me. In conclusion, I have shared just a few ways people are making a difference to help those who need it most. With the efforts of campaigns like the International Justice Mission, social movements like NotForSale.org and the 821 campaign, and hard-hitting documentaries like Nefarious, mass communication is used to really raise awareness of this global epidemic. Now, if you have a child, or maybe you have a young sibling or niece or nephew, think for a second. What are they worth to you? What are they worth to God? Genesis 1:21 states that we are made in the image and likeness of God. I have a 3-year-old niece, Maya, and she's priceless to me. I would do anything for her. I'm sure that rings true with a lot of people in this room as well. Unfortunately, not everyone in the world has the luxury of being valued, being worth something to their family. Now, Don Brewster, the CEO of Agape International Missions, illustrates one example of how cheap life can be, or perceived to be. This one experience comes from a Cambodian karaoke bar. So watch and listen.
But you walk into the place and the manager comes up to you and he says, I want you to know, when in the karaoke room, you can do anything you want to the girl. I mean, you can touch her, you can kiss her, whatever you want to do, but you can't have sex before you negotiate a price. So you choose your girl, you go to the room, and a woman comes in to police the room. But people would think she comes to protect the girls. She comes to make sure the girls are going after the men, that they're cuddling up to the men, that they're getting the guys to want to have sex, to pay for the big bucks for sex. So we get ready to leave, and I can pay with my credit card, okay? So you pay with your credit card, and here's your receipt that you get. Tiger beer, $4. Bunch of grapes, $5. Karaoke girl for 1 hour, do whatever you want to her, $3.
That is truly sickening. Thank you.